Okay, so this is my in-depth review of Watchmen episode 6, This Extraordinary Being. This episode was directed by Stephen Williams. It was written by Damon Lindelof and was also written by Cord Jefferson. So we see with the intro card here, it's always interesting with this show how they're going to show Watchmen on the screen. This was actually probably my favorite one where you have the cigarette smoke blow out Watchmen, it becomes Minutemen, and then the show becomes the show within the show, like having the comic within the comic here. That effect works so well with the American Hero Story show. I think it's always scenes that are like fan favorite scenes here because it's so funny and cheesy, and it just nails on the head what a show would be like about Watchmen if they were real people in the world. But we see here Hooded Justice in this version is being interrogated, and what was nice about this scene is they got a little info here for non-comic book readers of Watchmen, just giving you a little bit more about Hooded Justice to set you up for all this info you're going to get in this episode. You're basically learning here he's the original vigilante here. If you want to compare it to the Avengers, he's the Captain America of the group in the sense of he's the first Avenger. He is the original. He's inspired all of it. It's Hooded Justice. And what's so interesting, if you haven't read the comics, he's really the one you know almost the least about in the comics. So it was so smart of the TV show to tackle him and kind of make their own liberties on what his story would be like. And they tease stuff that would be addressed later on the episode well here, where they're asking him about why he has the noose around his neck and teasing him about his sexual relationship with Captain Metropolis. So it was really good setup in that sense, just to kind of give you an idea where this episode was going to go. And this scene works really well just to show that when they had Hooded Justice's hood come off here, it's the actor Cheyenne Jackson who couldn't be more opposite than the real Will Reeves here in looks. He's a white pretty boy under the hood, and it just shows you how the media interpretation of him in this America is completely off about Hooded Justice. And that reflects a lot in just society here when you see stuff in the media and in shows and movies that can be completely inaccurate and exaggerated. Cheesy and lame, you know? And it just comes here when he literally says the word cheese at the end after beating everybody up. And it's kind of showing you they take the Watchmen and the Minutemen and make them in this show very cut and dry or classic superheroes. But we know as fans of Watchmen that these characters are not like that. They're all gray, and their intentions are very complicated. I think what's really interesting here now when we get to where we left off with Angela taking the pills is that when she's in the jail cell, Laurie's on the way to see her, and the guard tells Laurie, you know, Angela needs to go to the hospital now. This is really bad. She needs help. And of course, Laurie, who's, again, going back to these gray characters, like, just cruel of her to, like, take her time with that part of it and wants to get information out of Angela before she brings her anywhere. Always playing the game. But we learn from Laurie the history basically of these nostalgia pills and that they were originally for people with dementia. And then, of course, the market had to increase for them and people wanted them and then people got addicted to them. There was ODs. And we learn that the person who owned the company with these pills was Lady True. Now, the PDF files that come out after the show for this episode that give just more explanation of the universe you're in, you can read them on HBO.com. They explain that Lady True made her fortune off of these pills. It was big pharma for her. So what Lindelof's been explaining in a lot of his interviews, and I think is the most brilliant part of his theme going on in this season, is genetic trauma. And this episode, right when it turns to black and white and we go down this nostalgia trip, it really is going down a rabbit hole of showing Angela her genetic trauma she has inherited and where it came from. And it's a really interesting concept. It's a cool concept for a show like this. It works. And it was haunting. I mean, imagine being in Angela's shoes and going to your grandfather or grandmother's past and seeing what they went through. It would probably terrify you and give you a whole new perspective on them, on life, and on yourself. So that's why I actually think it really worked here. At first I was skeptical, but as it went on, it made so much sense that they kept showing Angela's face through it. Not just as a reminder that she was witnessing all this, but that she's connected to her grandfather, even though she just met this guy and wasn't really close to him in life, didn't really know him, and how still it's in her DNA. So in this black and white scenery, where does it open up? It opens in 1938 when Will Reeves is becoming a police officer in the NYPD. So you see that he's one of the first black cops in the NYPD. The white sheriff here skips over him when they're presenting badges. So the black sheriff comes over and basically warns him about a thing called Cyclops, which we'll get more into. So then we get a dinner scene where he meets June, who is his love interest here, and she is a reporter. And what's interesting about June is she, throughout this episode, is seeing through things that Will cannot see himself, like his blind spots. And everything she's saying turns out to be right. Like, she has his best intentions in mind, and he doesn't, really one of his flaws is he doesn't listen to his wife or lover, you could say in the beginning, at all. And she's already, giving concern about him being in the Force, and him first attributing it to her seeing him as like a Tom, and him acknowledging they're definitely using him for publicity, which is funny because the Minutemen will do the same thing later on in this episode, which is just crazy and written so well how that connected. But June's actually most worried at this moment about him having a gun in his stick, because he is an angry, angry man. So she knows there's this monster that wants to come out here, and she's worried, is he taking the right path to deal with it? And there's a really interesting line Will says to her at this dinner scene where he says, "I don't want to live in the past." And she says back, "That is why you're so angry." And it's crazy to see that Will Reeves say that, where current day Will Reeves, we know, who's like 105, he obsesses over the past and totally lives in it and seems more calm and content. Very interesting, and I think it's just an incredibly interesting character they've written here in Will, and has way more depth than who I thought was the main character here in Angela, which is a little odd to me that we really didn't learn much about Angela here in this episode. It looks like it's going to be the next episode, but it's a big concern of mine, so I hope next episode answers a lot about Angela, because again, right now she is a very paper-thin character, but I'll get more into that later. Of one of the few complaints I have about this episode, I don't like that, you see it in this scene, is them cutting back to the opening scene from the show during the massacre in Tulsa, because it's exactly the same clips from the first scene of the show with that, and it's kind of feels like it's holding your hand a little too much, where, yeah, we know what he's talking about. We don't need to keep being reminded about it, and I know they might be using it as an effect to show he's thinking about that trauma, but I don't think every time it worked that way, and it was just kind of like there to pop in, but I thought it was overkill. So we see now, one of his first days on the job, Will catches this mob boss type guy burning down a Jewish deli, and he makes his first arrest. However, it's not what he thinks it's going to be, and this mob boss just knows he's going to be fine. When they get to the police station, he lies about everything, and it looks like these fellow cops are defending Will and are going to help him out, but they're really betraying him, and you see already that one of the cops makes the Cyclops symbol to the other cops. So there you go. There's your big hint at where this is going. Okay, so you'll start to see here too that this drum track kicks in behind, just like the movie Birdman. I was not a fan of them doing it in this episode. I think it was out of place. I think it was too on the nose in the sense of too soon. Like Birdman, it's not a recent movie, but it's not old either, where sometimes I get annoyed when there's too much imitation, and I get it's like a, tribute to it, but it's too soon to me that it's just like, it's kind of lame. It just doesn't work for me. I think it's kind of forced in there and not necessary. And that's when the episode can fall in that trap a bit, where it's too self-aware. Like they know this is the really artsy episode. They know it's going to have that constant tracking camera angles here wrapping around everybody, but it does feel a little too self-aware in that sense. That would be another criticism I have, and it really just kind of lasers in on that when they have that drum track going, which just, again, too much. So we see the next day, Will Reeves is walking on the street home, and these police officers offer him a ride home. You know that's always bad news when that happens. And one of the most haunting shots you see that was so effective in this episode was when he first denies going with them, and they're driving forward, and you see that they have the black men from the massacre tied up to the back of the car, just showing you this genetic trauma thing, and also connecting that same type of theme where it's like, it's that genetic DNA that passes down from your father's sins in a way, where yes, racism is still there. It's just in a different sense. It's maybe not guys being dragged by cars, but these guys are just as racist. So it shows that kind of just keeps going on, and it compares it to it so well with just one shot. Very effective. So this is where it gets really tough to watch, but it's super powerful, super necessary, and super important. When we see now Will gets beaten up by these cops in the alleyway, we get these incredible point of view shots of him getting lynched. And it is one of the most powerful shots I can remember in recent time watching on television, is when they put the hood over him and he's hanging up there, and you're seeing from his perspective, and he's almost about to die. Like, wow, like you can't just use a point of view shot so effectively and just purpose to make you feel like you're in that person's shoes. It really is eye-opening and powerful stuff. This is TV at its finest here. And it's brutal because then they just cut him down. It's like torture and a threat. Really just awful stuff. And this is where the Angela face works perfectly, that she comes in there and Regina King can really shine and feel for her grandfather being in that horrific moment, like the audience. The audience is, in a sense, sitting in Angela's shoes, finding out all about her grandfather in her grandfather's shoes. It's like with the show within a show, comic within a comic, it's like viewer within a viewer here. Pretty cool. And then we get this really powerful moment here where Will Reeves is really becoming Hooded Justice. It's such a perfect explanation, and it just blew me away that Lindelof and Cord Jefferson thought of this. They thought of how you can take a character that's already created in a comic and give him an origin story that just is perfect, and they didn't have much to work with for the character. And oh yeah, that's a perfect explanation why he would have a rope around his neck and a hood. Come on, it's just perfect. And this is his moment here in the alleyway when he hears a woman crying. This is his origin story fully coming and starting now. And he's getting his rage out at these guys about what just happened too. So it's not all about him just saving this woman either. And it's just perfect Watchmen-esque there. These are how these superheroes operate. It's always complicated. So the next day after these events, we see the wife talking to him, and she's like, why did you put that hood back on that they gave you? And she connects it to that movie he was obsessed with as a kid that we saw in the beginning of episode 1. Literally the first shot of this show on the projector of that fake movie called Trust in Law. It actually makes you feel dumb now seeing that footage again, because you're like, oh man, Lindelof was handing you right in a silver platter all these hints about this boy being Hooded Justice just in that first scene alone, and him saying justice. And it's literally the story of this show, this current show of Watchmen, where he would live this out by the end of the episode. And in the first episode at the end where he hangs Judd, it's him now hanging the corrupt white sheriff. It's exactly what you're seeing in that first scene. And that's just a lesson about shows, especially in a show premiere of season 1. That first shot is so important. It's always so telling. It's just another case here. And what's important too is Lindelof talks a lot about this in his interviews about Watchmen, is again this theme of how medium affects us, and how him as a kid connecting to this black sheriff Reeves, even taking on his name. And it's kind of like that effect that's happening now with how powerful Black Panther was as a movie, in the sense of that it is so important because this kid's connecting with someone who looks like him, and it's a good case of there's justice here with that type of person, and the white people like him and they are rooting him on. This is how important just film is and medium, and I think that really works well here too. And then, just to top off the brilliance of the writing and the origin of Hooded Justice, you had to say to yourself, well, wait a minute, if it is Will Reeves and he's black, we know from the comics that Hooded Justice, his eyes we see with the skin around it are white. So you're like, that doesn't make sense. But they pull it off perfectly that it would be a black man hiding he's black and painting his eye area white. Crazy, and it's crazy how it connects to Sister Night, because she does the same thing, but she goes the opposite effect, or she's going full black here. So again, just that extra mile here, the theme building here, and the little meticulous details, just masterful. Oh man, and then we get one of the best scenes that I know a lot of Watchmen superhero fans that love a good revenge scene and action scene here get. It's got to be the best one of the show yet, with Hooded Justice going and beating the crap out of those cops who lynched him, and they're all Klansmen. What an awesome scene. The action was really good here. Probably the best action we've seen in the show yet. And the music really worked here. I like that it was that slow, oldie music here with the black and white. It was just perfect. You don't need the Birdman drums. Sometimes less is more. But you see, though, he takes note when he's in this hideout. You're seeing these Cyclops symbols of the eye everywhere. And it's just crazy to go back to the last episode, Looking Glass, when he was in the 7th Cavalry's just warehouse. They had that big symbol there. So it's all connected there, too. That the 7th Cavalry is the new version of Cyclops, kind of continuing in their own way that white supremacy stuff. And then you see a mesmerism book here, too, which is interesting, giving you hints of where this is going, and the big reveal later on. Oh, my God. And then just to go more into layers of this storyline, you see Hooded Justice, when he's fighting, ends up in this deli. It's the same deli from the American Hero story a couple episodes back. And in their version, he jumps through the window. In this, he's actually jumping out and just showing you the differences and how they got the story wrong there. And we get this powerful moment here with Hooded Justice freezing midair, turning, and it's Angela's eyes behind the mask. Woo! Regina King with that eye acting. I know everyone praises her to death, but she deserves it. I mean, just the tears there and the way she's looking. Oh my God, just powerful stuff. And she sees Lori here, and she's kind of snapping out now a bit of this trip. And Lori says they gave her a shot of adrenaline. And then Cal, her husband, comes in. He's reading her lines that you're supposed to read to get them back down to earth. I feel like we've all been here before on a bad trip of any sort of weed or anything you've taken. You know what that feeling is like. And this scene really nailed that from her point of view, where you're just like, you want to get out. You're like in a trap and people are trying to help you, but you still are just so down the rabbit hole. Okay, and then we get a great character introduction here of, we go back to Hooded Justice's house and we meet Nelson Gardner, aka Captain Metropolis. And I like they beat around the bush with each other here about hiding their identities, but they got a vibe of who they really are. But this is important, this scene, because it's Captain Metropolis introducing Hooded Justice to the Minutemen. And he's like, this team is incomplete without the man who inspired them, Hooded Justice. This is, again, the same thing the police force was doing to him, just using him. This is Will's blind spot. He's not seeing that. And his wife sees it right away, especially in the scene. He just doesn't listen. And a crazy line, watching back this episode, you gotta catch it, is when Hooded Justice says to Metropolis, what does a Cyclops mean to you? And Hooded Justice brings up the connection to the Ku Klux Klan. And literally, word for word, Metropolis says, sounds like a job for the Minutemen, all right. Later in this episode, he says the complete opposite, betrays him, was totally lying to him, and says that it's not a job for the Minutemen. Totally just used him and fooled him. And for fans of the Boys series on Amazon, you clearly see that Homelander, the character, was inspired by Captain Metropolis from the original Watchmen comic. He's a master of strategy. He's just a weasel. And again, the wife at the end of the scene warned him not to join. But his anger, his ego here, and maybe the sexual attraction he has towards Metropolis just sucks him in here against his better judgment. And masterful editing here where the wife says no to the idea of this, and it cuts to Metropolis and Hooded Justice banging, and Metropolis going, yes, yes, perfect. Adds a little humor to the episode too. And you're getting so many red flags about this Minutemen group. They're all just a bunch of really messed up people. And he's saying, oh, some of them, you know, might have a little problem with him being black, so keep the makeup on in the hood. And you know Metropolis is racist too. He's just acting all nice to him because he needs to. It's his strategy to get him on board. And the underlying tragedy in this episode here, I think a lot of people are missing, is that Will is pushing away the one who truly loves him and looks out for his best interest, which is his wife. And he's not only falling for Metropolis, he's really falling for this Minutemen group and revenge and anger. And this is the group that will leave him to dry and use him, like the police force. Another little complaint though I have is the reveal now that the wife was the little girl he picked up. Cool. I mean, maybe we'll have a better purpose of that being the case later in the season, but right now it just seems like silly. Doesn't really add much. And they did an awesome job with this scene here with the Minutemen talking to the press. And you see how when Hooded Justice gives this chance to talk about the Klan and this Cyclops group, he's cut off by Metropolis right away. And then you see this poster of Metropolis panned perfectly by the camera here. The same poster we saw earlier in the season where Metropolis has a crook here and it is a black boy. Damn. Again, these little details. So now we kind of go more to the main story, important stuff for the show as a season, and we go a couple years in the future where the kid they have is a little older. It's a boy. And you wonder how it's going to connect to Angela and her just family tree here. But Will goes to the Capitol Theater. There was this big incident here where the black people in the theater attacked each other. We learn it's through the projector and the flashing, and it's this mesmerism. Will connects all these dots, figures out it's the Cyclops and what they're doing, and he calls the Minutemen, gets Metropolis in line, and he just doesn't care. Turns his back to him. And he has that line, going to have to solve black unrest all on your own. I have a feeling that Judd, at the end of all this, because people are confused about what his deal really is, I think he'll become a face of a modern Metropolis here, and you'll find out he was just the same way. Because that's, I think, the way it will fit with the theme. Otherwise, I don't think it would work. And I think it's supposed to show that the older Will in current time sees through all this stuff because he knew people like the police officers he worked with and Metropolis, and then he sees Judd just another one. But maybe not. Maybe Will is over analyzing here in the future. We'll see. But we get some really cool action here again. I love the shot he has when he finds out the mob boss owns that racist warehouse, shoots him in the head, and then he goes in there, video game point of view style, where he's shooting all these racists. I love it. And then he finds one of these guys in the process of using his projector and the mesmerism and how they're just planning to pin these black people against each other. And he chokes them out. And then he burns all these guys alive, burns the warehouse to the ground. And it's just a beautiful shot of him looking at the warehouse, it burning, and connecting to when he was a kid looking at Tulsa burning. But did they need to show him as a kid looking at Tulsa burning? Let the audience figure that out. Again, what is with the hand holding here? Damon Lindelof audiences are always very high IQ, and you know these Redders catch everything. Let them figure that out. Let them connect that symbolism. I don't know why they kept doing the work for us. It was a little weird. But notice real quick too, he brings home one of those projectors. So that's important. I wonder how much he learned about him from that. So he comes home to his son dressing up like him in the costume. This really sets off the mother here. Man, those goddamn Birdman drums, stop! And it's a little rushed here with his wife flipping completely, but you gotta give it a pass. There's only so much time constraint. This isn't a 3-hour movie, and this story totally could have been. But they gotta kind of cut down time here, so I get they had to do a quick thing with that. But she sees the monster he's become, which she's warned about, and that he's actually used this hooded justice thing as just driving his anger more, and she thought it might heal him, and she realized she was wrong. So we cut now to current day with him waiting for Judd with the noose the night of Judd's hanging. And he flicks this light on him, beginning the mesmerism. And it's such a cool effect where he stops doing it, gets his 2 cents in here, explains he's justice to Judd. You gotta realize he's basking in this, Will, because this is his childhood dream as a kid. He's hanging the corrupt white sheriff here. And notice, obviously here with the writing, Judd saying, I'm trying to help you people. So he's got some racism, and Will's like, you have clan robe in your closet. And he's like, oh, that's my grandpa's. And he's proud of his legacy. And Will's like, if you're so proud of your legacy, why hide it? Now, in the podcast with Lindelof here, they were talking about heritage being this short word in real life, just covering up racism. And it's a great point, and I think that's the point they're kind of making here too, where it's like, hey man, you know, maybe you're not a Ku Klux member, but just because it's your grandpa, you keep it going and you honor that. No, you should just address that. And it reminds me of just all the controversy surrounding the Confederate flag and people keeping that up when, yeah, it's a huge symbol of just awfulness in our country. So it's like they're kind of making that point. Like, it doesn't matter if your grandpa had the Confederate flag. You know it stands for something bad. Don't use heritage and excuse or legacy. But Judd's like, you don't know me, old man. And Will's like, oh, I know you, and makes the Cyclops symbol. And then he turns on the mesmerism, tells him you can hang yourself now. And it's so powerful that they changed Angela's face here on Will when she hands the rope to Judd. It all just looks so cool in black and white here too. And to clarify, because I saw a lot of people asking about this, those pills she took would have this newest memory of Will, because this was the batch she sent in the car when it fell down after the events of that night. So yeah, he had time to make that memory into pill form. A nice wrapping around here where you got the snare drum player back. This whole episode started with the snare drum and it ends with one. And it ends with this mysterious woman who's like, she does look like you. I'm gonna take you home now, honey. So wonder who that is, any theories you got. And I also want to hear theories too about, do you think Judd is gonna end up being someone who's completely in the wrong, or is Will actually misjudged him? But you see now this ends where she wakes up in Lady True's crib, and it sets us up now for this new Angela we're gonna get and where this is all gonna go. So this episode, second viewing, I liked way better than the first time I watched it. Like I said, I had a little bit of nitpicking. I always do. I always try to keep it the highest bar here. This rightfully deserves a 9.7 out of 10. It was amazing. Again, gotta take a little points off for the bird drum, and again, the hand holding was really unnecessary with so much scenes with the kid popping up that we already kind of knew about. And I actually would have appreciated too a little bit more of Angela in the cell and what was going on, or when she was moved to the hospital, where, like, what were we seeing from it. And I also felt like it was a tease with the pedophiles before this episode, because they were talking about all the side effects of nostalgia. She took a whole bottle of this pill and there's all these crazy side effects, but they didn't really go there. They didn't go to her really tripping out. It kind of was just like, this is just a flashback, like, and it's same normal speed. I thought it would be a little more crazy and make sense with the actual amount she took, but so be it. As a whole, the best thing about this episode is it really is an origin story for Hooded Justice. You couldn't do it any better for that character. Bravo to Lindelof and Cord Jefferson with this writing here. Shout out to the directing by Stephen Williams. I think this episode would just be awesome as its own movie. You take the first scene from episode 1 with the massacre, you put that at the top, and then just play the rest of this episode. It's an origin story for Hooded Justice movie. You could play it on its own without watching any of the rest of the season. So I think that's the coolest part if you look at it that way. Now, as a season as a whole, it made me a little worried this episode, because we really learned about Angela's past, but again, I'm just so concerned about her being the main character and her character being so paper thin. There's only 3 episodes in this series as a whole to go, and they've emphasized, even under the podcast by HBO, it says episode 9 is going to be the series finale, and Lindelof says he's not going to be involved with the season 2 if there even is one, but he won't do it. And yeah, I just think that he has said he's wrapping season 1 as one whole story. Great, but I'm really worried, how in 3 hours left are we going to tie all these ends? That's the biggest concern, but we'll see. You got to see the full product here, where it's going. But again, if this was standing on its own as an episode, as a movie, it's 9.7 worthy. It's really great. Great themes. Looked amazing. Again, a tad bit a little too self-aware, but I'll take it anyway. Let me know what you thought of it down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please make sure you subscribe to my channel. I'll be reviewing every episode of Watchmen. I'm also doing his Dark Materials and Servant as well on Apple TV+. And I also interview celebrities themselves, so you don't want to miss that. And please follow me at Steve Varley1 on Twitter and Instagram for more of me. And I'll see you next time.